So today, thank you again for joining us. We're talking about mental health. So the topic is very broad. I want to talk about what mental health means and what's the difference between mental health, how it relates to mental illness, but also talking about just mental well-being and resiliency. So it is a very broad topic because understanding our mental health is really crucial to us taking care of ourselves. Quite often people will talk about their physical health and you'll go for an annual physical, you'll do blood work, but we don't seem to do the same thing for our mental health. So I'm going to ask you to all check in with yourselves. And the way that you do that is, why is mental health important? So if you could use the chat feature, and if you could please write in, why do you think mental health is important? And there's no wrong answers, okay? Let's start that. No wrong answers. So if you use the chat, why is mental health important? I kind of gave some clues already. Sorry about that. Why is your mental health important? Why is this topic really important? I'll give you a few minutes to type in any thoughts you might have about why is mental health important. Yeah, like mental health related to someone noted about, childhood and how that could affect your mental health, not being paid attention to or being ignored. And of course, for some folks, it could be neglect, or it could be trauma from childhood and how that potentially affects your mental health. But the other thing I'd like to say is, yes, our childhood and maybe things that have happened to us affect us, but doesn't mean that it has to affect us our whole lives. Does that make sense? That means that there's ways there, for example, some folks that were raised in families that were quite challenging have developed really special skills that make them more intuitive, that make them more aware. Seeing things, being able to identify things early on. And so there are challenges, but with those challenges also come hopefully some other ways and maybe some gifts. There's an excellent book. It's actually called The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. And I've read that book many years ago. It's a fairly easy read, but it really kind of, for me, it helped me understand things about, childhood and how challenging times within childhood could actually give us some skills. And so I do recommend that book. But again, trying to understand ourselves, our mental health, what affects our mental health, be it from our childhood or today, stress, right? Mental health affects you and those around you. Absolutely. So you ever around someone that's really having a challenging time and maybe they're a bit negative and maybe they're negative a lot, and you're around that person that's negative, right? It affects us, right? So when someone's always down and talking negatively, or maybe agitated because they're having difficulty, and so that comes across as anger or agitation, we're affected by it. So we're affected by our own mental health, and we are affected by those around us. Excellent. Thank you so much. Very true. Very true. Let's see what else we have here. It helps to relate to the world in ways others can understand and understand yourself. Yes. So understanding how we relate to the world, how the world relates to us, and how that might affect our mental health for better or for worse. Because understanding what is good for our mental health too, we could create system supports or groups or how we interact with the world that suits our purposes, right? And sometimes we make decisions even on making major life changes because the way our life might be designed right now maybe is not really good for our mental health. And sometimes we have to make some important changes. That can relate to work, it can relate to relationships, right? So we're going to be talking about all these different areas today. So we could function as a community and support one another. Excellent, thank you. And strengthen our families. Yes. That is really why I really enjoy doing these, because this is, supporting the community. You're attending today is you're taking action, which is part of Mental Health Awareness Month. You're taking action by being here. You're also checking in by responding to these questions. And later on, I'm going to have you check in with your mental health and rate yourself later as well. And also, if you need to get support, or if others that you care about need support, how do you know when they need support? And where do you go for that support? So I'm going to cover all those areas today. Okay. Mental health affects our physical health. Absolutely. Yes. If we're under a lot of stress, people could develop ulcers. People could eat unhealthy because of that. And because we eat unhealthy, we could have high cholesterol. So again, it affects our physical health. Overall health. Yes, absolutely. Great. Great responses. Mental health is important because it affects our overall health and can take a physical toll on us. Absolutely. Our emotions could absolutely make us sick. So, again, if I'm thinking, having difficulty coping and I have a lot of stress and maybe I'm thinking very negatively and I'm feeling down, I mean, it just could really affect, like maybe I don't even want to eat and I'm just not eating well, or maybe I'm eating too much, right? And so it absolutely takes a toll on us. Excellent. It's essential for survival. It's just as essential for survival as physical health. Mental health is just as essential for survival as physical health. Absolutely. Thank you. Mental health is important to me because I'm not able to help my family, because I'm not able to help my family. So maybe a family member is struggling and sometimes we don't know what to do. And then someone else wrote, it's just important again, is physical health for peace and mental clarity. Yeah, if I'm in a good mental state, I'm more likely to make really good decisions. And when I'm not doing well, when I'm stressed and I'm worried and I'm anxious, I'm likely not going to make such good decisions in my life. Okay. How to help people. It could also make you tired, right? Good. And we have in Spanish, a problem, mental health, no attention, affects you very much. And I believe it's saying I'm sorry, could we get the Spanish translator to interpret that for me, please? Yes, excellent, thank you. All right, well, you guys did an amazing job responding to that. Again, there's no wrong answer, but most people, I'm sure that put in responses are thinking about for yourselves about how mental health has affected you and how may it affect your family members. And so this topic is crucial, really, to us working on ourselves and feeling better. And Juan, if you could work on someone's drawing, not accidentally, on the PowerPoint, if you could fix that, that would be great.
Sure, I will troubleshoot that, Dr. Jamie, although because you are the host, I'm not sure that I can clear that up, but go right ahead and proceed, please.
Okay, thank you. So here's my next question. If you could do anything you wanted related to your health and well-being right now, anything you wanted, if you had a magic wand, what might you want to change? What might you want to change today if you wanted to do anything you could, change anything you wanted related to your mental health? What might you change? And again, if you could use the chat feature, that would be great. And I'll read those chat responses as we warm up to this topic. If you could do anything you wanted today related to your mental health and well-being, what might you change? If you had the magic wand in your hand and you can magically change anything, what might that be? Yeah, stress related to family and also stress related to family that may have mental illness. My mental health will be pleasant. Someone wrote my age. Okay, all right, that's going beyond mental health, but that's a good one. Helping my son. If I could change, right, helping my son. So having the skills to help my son that's dealing with bipolar and schizoaffective disorder. Great. Okay. So again, thinking about, it's kind of similar to why you may have attended today, right? Better boundaries of self-care. Great. Better boundaries for self-care. Excellent. Yeah, sometimes we just are saying yes too often and doing everything we can for everyone else, and we're falling apart and we're not setting boundaries that help us. We need to say no sometimes. Staying centered during stressful times. Excellent. Really good. Excellent. And I'm going to touch upon all of these today. We're not going to go to the depth of any one of these in particular, because this is a very broad overview, but I'm hoping we'll be able to respond again to your questions later. All right. Being able to stay centered even during stressful times. And I think we're up to date with the chat questions. Thank you. All right. So again, I know we haven't discussed everything yet, but what is it that you need to do? What can help you achieve that vision? So what you just described is a vision, right? You described a different place you'd like to be than where you are now. So if you don't have a pad and piece of paper, if you'd like to get one, please do. I think sometimes that's helpful, or at least to think about what might you need to do to achieve that vision, that goal. And if you don't know, that's okay. I mean, maybe your answer is by attending today's webinar will help you figure that out. We're going to ask the same questions later, but this is what we want everyone to be thinking about. You know, understanding my mental health, we already talked about why it's important. And then as I check in with myself about what's going on with my mental health today for myself, what might I want to change? And the next question is, what might I need to do to do that? Right? What steps might I have to take? Okay. So again, we're just warming up to the topic, but these are the questions that, you know, we should really check in with ourselves and ask quite often to see how we're doing. We should always be checking in with our emotions and how we're doing, how our day went, what was good, maybe not so good. And some of us do that by talking with maybe family members, maybe when you come home from work, when you have your day, or if something happened with a friend, you might make a phone call, talk to another friend. So we process with others sometimes. Now, some folks really aren't comfortable doing that. And so some people journal, right? They write down their thoughts about their day. That's part of taking an assessment for yourself, right? It's a measurement for you to have the opportunity to reflect on your life. Sometimes we don't have the time and we feel like life could feel like it's running us over, right? So it's important we take the time, a few minutes, just to reflect on how I'm doing. How did my day go? How do I feel? And you know, sometimes it's really nice things that happen, and those, it's not always bad. Sometimes wonderful things could happen, and that's fun to share as well. And you know, someone mentioned that the vision that they have, and this is the hardest part, if you have a vision that involves another person, of which we may not have control over. And that's hard because the vision's not really for ourselves, it's a wish for someone else. And sometimes we can't control that. And that is really hard. That's a struggle. Okay. But that's why there's a lot of support groups for family members too. You know, like NAMI is very involved with that. So if you haven't already, if anyone is on this webinar today that is struggling with the health of a family member that has mental health issues, mental illness, please do get the support, because you're not alone, and other people will share what's helped them, and that will help you. So please do reach out for support. So I'm going to go over this model next. And this illness wellness continuum is just a model, okay? And it's first of all, it's established in 1972, and believe it or not, I recently attended a wellness class in coaching, and they use this model. And I want to talk about some aspects of this model. So basically, you know, the model's old and it's not accurate. Okay, there's pieces that are accurate. So for instance, if someone has a disability, it doesn't mean that that person's going to die, right? Of course that's ridiculous, right? But this is the extreme. So if we use the medical model as an example, right? If someone has something untreated and they're not taking stock of it, if they're not going to the doctors and it's, you know, possibly a terminal illness, of course, a person could die. So we want people to address it, right? Well, how do we address it? Well, what are the signs, right? If you see, for instance, if you see a mole on the body, it doesn't look right, you want to get that checked out. That's a sign or a symptom. We want to check it out, right? If we leave it unchecked, possibly it could be cancer, it could spread, it could be dangerous. That's the extreme, right? So being aware of the signs and symptoms is helpful to keep us on the path towards wellness. But please know that many people have difficulties with symptoms or mental health issues or even mental illness or even a medical disability or whatever it might be. It doesn't mean that it has to be a tragedy, because it's not. Quite often people have great fulfilling lives in spite of, and sometimes even enhance their lives because of a disability. People don't even like the word disability, right? But the part that is important to understand about wellness is about awareness. And so I'm not focusing so much on just the signs and symptoms, even though we do need to be aware of signs and symptoms. So for instance, talking about normal day-to-day stress, you need to know what stress means, what the signs are of stress, and how you know you're starting to have more symptoms, right? Now, stress is normal. Stress is part of everyone's life. But sometimes that stress is so intense, we could develop symptoms, right? And if we think about what symptoms might stress cause us when they're becoming more excessive, more extreme, difficulty sleeping, right? Being agitated, forgetfulness, distracted, right? So there could be symptoms. It doesn't even mean that you have to have a mental illness, but the stress in and of itself could manifest into more and more things. So the key to mental wellness and mental health is to always track how we're doing. Pay attention to signs and symptoms, being aware. Those things are important because if we don't stay aware and we don't pay attention to the signs and symptoms, things could get progressively worse. So we want to pay attention to what we're feeling. Just like hopefully if you had something wrong with you physically, you don't feel right, you may not know what it is, you're going to go to the doctors, right? If you're not feeling well mentally, what might you do? Would you go to the doctors? Would you seek counseling? Would you connect with a friend? Again, sometimes it depends on how severe things are, but you need to do something, especially when it's there for a long period of time. However, we're not talking about day-to-day stress, normal stress, because it's all there. It's a matter of when that stress becomes difficult for us, when we're having difficulty coping with the amount of stress in our lives. This is not a sign of weakness, and this is not anyone's fault. Sometimes life gives us much more to deal with than we could possibly handle. And sometimes it just doesn't stop and more things keep happening, right? So it's a multitude of stressors in our lives. So again, it could be, concerns about a family member that's always in our mind, be it if they have any type of illness or if they have any disability, if they have maybe some challenges that they're not dealing with or not getting help with, and we're worried about them, but we can't change that. And then on top of that, I'm stressed at work, right? And on top of that, you have some fights maybe with a friend or a family member. You see where I'm going, where it just becomes, everything could feel like a stressor. That's when we're going to have difficulty coping potentially. So you need to think about, be aware of that, and what might you be able to do. I'm going to talk about that later, but again, awareness is important. And then what do I do about it? How do I get the support I need to feel better? Reaching out, again, is not a sign of weakness. Reaching out is smart and is a way to keep yourself mentally well when there's too much stress. So this illness wellness continuum, again, I don't believe in it. I don't think it's perfectly accurate, but it does kind of help us, gear us to talk about mental health, our signs when we're stressed out, when we're having difficulty. For instance, a normal thing that happens in our lives is that we lose people. People pass away, breakups happen, relationships ends, and we could be sad and depressed. Well, that's normal, right? Being sad and depressed is normal, and we have to grieve. That's normal. But what about if I'm not getting out of bed now and I'm not going to work and I stopped eating? That's, again, we need help. We don't want to stay in that place. Everyone deals with things differently, but when the signs and symptoms become more severe, we need to take action. And if we have friends or family that are having difficulty, knowing what that might look like, right? We have a friend or family member that, is no longer reaching out, maybe doesn't return phone calls, is isolating, stops eating, change in personality. These are the things we might be worried. You might check in on them saying, I'm noticing some things and I'm worried about you. How are you doing? Do you want to talk about anything, right? Reaching out to others, okay? Another way to kind of bring this point about there is no paradigm that perfectly explains it's not such a black and white way of thinking. It's not just a continuum from, mental, perfection to not doing so well mentally, right? Everyone's somewhere along the continuum at different points in our lives. Another example is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, basic needs. We have basic needs that we need to have met in order to live and survive. One is like the need for air and food, right? And some folks, because of financial stuff, especially with COVID having happened, sometimes we worry about food, or maybe, we can't afford, we have to pay the rent, we're choosing. So that's challenging. And so that's a basic need that everyone has. However, there's other examples of when people actually, for a higher purpose, because of the need for self-actualization, having such a meaningful challenge in their lives, there are people that actually have not eaten, and because they believe in a cause, right? There's the example of the starving artist, right? So again, it doesn't mean just because these are challenged doesn't mean that you can have these higher self-actualization or peak experiences, as Maslow called them, that even in struggle we could still have good things happening in our lives. So again, it's just a paradigm to look at for kind of goals. I mean, Maslow's hierarchy is saying we're looking to self-actualize, we're looking to find purpose in our lives. But my point is we don't have to have every single one of those needs met in order for that to happen. It's not that linear, that it goes up perfectly, right? So there are many factors that affect us in our lives. And so again, this is just some ways of thinking about it, but we're going to make it more basic than these paradigms, okay? So again, we're talking about mental illness to wellness, and it's not simple. So again, that continuum from wellness, what we consider wellness, and again, everyone self-defines that, to mental illness, because illness and wellness coexist. Absolutely. Mental wellness can positively impact health and well-being, right? And if someone has a mental illness, it does not mean that you're not well. Many people lead very successful lives with mental illness, okay? Some people have different diagnoses, be it physical or mental. It doesn't mean that they don't have mental wellness, okay? Because people can live quite great lives, okay? And also know that we don't want to feed into that stigma, because, again, so you have a choice. Illness is not a choice. Sometimes people have illnesses. It's not a choice. It's not their fault, right? But again, in our society, we have the stigma against people that may have illness, right? It's ridiculous, but it still exists and we have to acknowledge it, okay? So we want to address it. The goal really is thinking about where you are now and what are the ways you could give yourself the best quality of life. Again, thinking about that vision of what I can do to enhance my quality of life. Now, you have to make that decision and really process that the goal that you have may not be realistic. It may not be realistic, especially if the goal involves other people that we can't control. That's hard. And so how do I allow myself to take care of myself and let go of something I cannot change? Can I still have a life and feel good and take care of myself when I know someone else might be struggling, right? And giving yourself permission to yes, hopefully you could get to a place of yes, that you could still have a good life, even though someone else might be struggling. And because you'll be there for them, you're going to do everything you can. But if that becomes the only thing you focus on, your life becomes really out of balance, all right? Because that's not something we might be able to change. And that's hard. That's really hard to let go of. Okay. The other thing I wanted to highlight, that we are not addressing every single thing today when we talk, even though this is a very broad topic. We need to recognize there's other things that affect our mental health and well-being, right? And that includes healthcare disparities, implicit bias, prejudice, right? The impact of being in a negative work environment or a negative home environment, right? Some of those things you can change though, right? Prejudice, mistreatment, trauma. Those are things that may have happened in your life we can't change. But again, knowing that they affect us, knowing that it's the environments that we may not be able to control, we can't control society, and maybe their negative thoughts or discrimination that we're exposed to, right? So I just want to mention those things because they do affect our mental health, either consciously or unconsciously, right? And so I'm just putting that out there. Okay. So again, we talked a little bit about this, so I don't think we'll go too much more into it, but what does mental wellness, well-being mean to you? And from what it used to mean to what it means today could change over time. So it's not something that stays stagnant. And obviously that would change based on my life circumstances, right? Where am I now? And what does it mean? What would it mean from where I'm sitting today? What would mental wellness mean? Right. And again, I really appreciate the honesty in someone earlier sharing about what they wish they could have and knowing they can't have that. That mental wellness would be nice if things would go really well with everyone else around us, right? And we could feel good about that. That would be great. And we're never going to give up on trying probably for that. But can I be mentally well in spite of it? That's hard, right? So again, what are you able and what's within your ability right now today to define that for yourself? And what might you want to do to achieve that? And if you don't want to do anything, that's fine too. Again, we have to warm up. We have to be ready. I know people put in the chat the idea about weight loss. And again, we may want to have that desire. And are we willing to change that? And then as many people that are comfortable with their weight and that they're okay with not changing their weight, right? So it's up to us what we feel. And then what is it we want to do about that? And then are we ready to do that? Are we ready to set up a change plan for whatever that goal might be, right? So good. And then also to talk about global health and wellness, kind of things that are, the perfect world, right? So global words of well-being and is about compassion. And most importantly is self-compassion. So that means that I'm not hard on myself. I don't judge myself. I'm not going to criticize myself. I'm not going to beat myself up for something that didn't go right. And I'm not saying that that's easy, but it's a goal. So when we do find ourselves beating ourselves up and not practicing self-compassion, we can change the switch. We could say, stop. I'm not going to keep talking to myself in that way. I need to let go of that. That's not right. I'm being too critical. And then change the wordings. So that's what I'm saying. We need to listen to ourselves and what we're actually telling ourselves, hopefully consciously that you could hear it, but there's sometimes unconscious stuff going on, right? I mean, we get these messages usually, over time from past history that we internalize sometimes, the negative messages we received. And now the voice is ours, our negative voice, our critical voice. It's okay to have them. We all do. But how could I then recognize them and change them and make the voice softer? Have the voice be more loving. So compassion. Compassion starts with compassion for oneself. Loving oneself, as best we can. And then, of course, having compassion for others, right? You ever around someone that just by being around them, you feel good? There's something that emulates from them, that, the kindness comes across or the caring comes across. It's really nice to surround ourselves with folks like that if we can, to have people that are kind to us, right? That are compassionate to us, because sometimes that may be hard for ourselves. Or having a good friend that might say, you're being too self-critical. It's okay. You're human. You're allowed to make mistakes, right? Whatever they might say. But we need to practice those positive things ourselves, right? Empowerment is another, again, being empowered to have choices, feeling in control of our lives. We don't always feel that way, but we work towards that. Fairness in the world. Definitely the world is not fair. It's not fair. Many things are unfair. And how do we live with that? But we work towards fairness, right? Some people are very much advocates for fairness and justice, right? Some people that's something that's important for them. That creates meaning in their lives. Shared humanity. Again, having a sense of shared humanity. We're all in this together. We're a community. Someone mentioned that earlier. Helping our community, helping others, right? A shared humanity. And sometimes we need help. Sometimes we're the ones that could give the help, and sometimes we're the ones that need to receive the help. and both are very good. And someone also mentioned earlier in the chat, looking for the idea of peace. What does that mean to you? Peace. Peace of mind, peace in the world, both at the what they call the microcosm, the macrocosm. So feeling peace within myself would be, for me, the microcosm, and the macrocosm is peace in the world, where there's not war, where people aren't hurting each other, right? And altruism, doing good deeds, right? Being kind words, smiling at a stranger. So those are kind of things that, we could all work on, I think, kind of these global things that can enhance well-being. So here's the next question, and if you don't mind, again, we'll ask you to utilize the chat. What are the things that might be taking away from your well-being right now? What are the things that are taking away from your well-being? What's getting in the way of that? So another way of asking that, maybe what's causing you stress. If you feel comfortable sharing, you could do that. If not, that's okay too. You could just ask yourself the question and answer it in your own mind. So what are the things that take away from my well-being? Stress,
Este bienestar, el estrés, el capitalismo y la imposición, los medios sociales, demandas familiares, enfermedades, las noticias. Sí, es molesto. Hay veces que tenemos que apagarnos, hay veces que necesitamos un recreo. Y
self-retreat. Do you know what I'm saying when I talk about self-retreat, positive self-retreat? Turning off the phone, turning off the TV, don't watch the news, create a nice, relaxing environment, right? Taking a nice hot bath with candles, whatever it is for you that you could do to take care of yourself. That's kind of a retreat. Now, of course, there's retreats people go away to. Some people go to take these classes where they practice eating well, and yoga and meditation. Of course, those are formal retreats, and by all means, you could do those. And of course, there's classes for that as well. But I think it's important for you to think about what are some of the ways that you could work on that, and what are some things you could do. But so again, if we know what's taking away from our health and well-being, is it possible for us to change those things? Even if we were to change something small, what might that be? Right? So maybe we can't take away all the stress, but we can remove just a little bit of the stress. Maybe I can't change the stress right now, but I'm not going to take on any more stress. And that's about setting boundaries, right? Someone mentioned earlier. Saying, no, I'm sorry, I can't right now. I just have too much on my plate. And we all, it's hard. It's hard to set a boundary. It's hard to say no, because we feel like we should be able to take care of everyone, but sometimes we can't. And we have people on that talking about, caring for others, and that's stressful. And it's also taking care of others as being loving, but sometimes can we take times to love ourselves? Is there respite care available? Meaning that there's someone that could come in, either a professional or a friend or a family member, someone else, to care for the loved one, so that, you could have a break. Is that possible? So again, these questions, I'm hoping that you're processing a little bit the idea of like, well, what can I change? What's in my control? Can I give myself permission to ask for help? How could I take care of myself? Because the reality is, especially when we are caring for loved ones that may have Alzheimer's or other types of needs, if we get empty, we have really nothing to give, and we're just kind of we're taking care of them, but we're not fulfilled, and it comes out in some way. So the more I take care of myself, the more I focus on me as far as doing something nice for myself. I'm feeling that well, as they say, and I'm feeling better, and I'm going to be better to be around, and I'm going to be more loving and caring. So it actually, in taking care of ourselves, we are taking care of others. Does that make sense, right? So don't think of it as a selfish thing. It's a positive self thing. It is not selfish to take care of yourself. It is not selfish to say, I need a break. It's not selfish to say, can you help me? Right? So having someone, again, respite care, having a break, whatever that break might be, a healthy break for you, can you give that to yourself? Right? And yeah, we're happy, by the way, someone asked a question. I'm happy to send out copies of the PowerPoints to anyone that's interested. Juan will give you the information later as well. But yes, you don't have to take notes. The only notes I recommend you take is for yourself, as far as thinking about this for yourself. Like, is anything coming up to your mind that you're thinking about doing, and then actualizing that. So I just want to warm you up to that idea, right? So what are the things that take away from our well-being? And of course, the next question, what are the things that contribute to our well-being? And I know some people put in earlier about reading and meditating. I saw some of that. Yeah, so we know what takes away from our well-being. Then let's talk about, well, what are the things that feed or are healthy for our well-being? So again, if you'd like to chat those in, please do. What are the things that feed your soul, right? Contribute to your well-being? Dance, great. Lots of exercise. Yes, physical, getting it out of your body, right? A lot of times I'm tired. I don't want to go for a walk, and sometimes I have encouragement from family members, It also helps, when you have a dog, by the way, the dog has to go for a walk. So, and then you do for your brisk walk and it helps get rid of that stress. It's really good, right? So someone wrote music. Excellent. Yes. Listening to songs that inspire you, make you feel good, right? Let out all the noise. Just listen to the music. Let out the noise in your head of the things you have to do and the stress. Let go, right? Listen to music. My grandson. And can we have that translation, please, from Spanish to English?
Going to church.
Excellent. Yes, having a community, going someplace that feeds you, right? Feed your soul. Power walking, yoga, me time, self-care, love it. Gardening, yes. Gardening is very nurturing, being in touch with the earth, right? Excellent. So the next question is, are you practicing these things, right? Or have you forgotten? So a lot of times we know that what works for us, but then somehow we get busy and we forget. That's okay. This is a reminder to put those things back in your life, right? So again, that vision of what it is, what you want. You want to feel better, you want to have less stress. These are things you could absolutely do that help you with that, helps you cope with stress by doing these positive activities you mentioned. And I like when people write them in, because sometimes people don't know what might be helpful to them. And so when you're writing them in, other people say, oh, I'm going to try that. Sometimes, we don't know what will make us feel better. So sometimes we try different things, right? And also what makes you feel better, what feeds your soul, what makes you have less stress, what enhances your well-being is different for everyone. But you should at least explore what that is for you if you don't know. Try different things and see what works for you. Some people like to jog or run. Some people don't like that. Some people like to bike ride. Some people like to sit at the beach, listen to the ocean, right? Some people exercise with tapes, meditation tapes online. Some people like to go with a group of people, to exercise. Whatever works for you. There's no right or wrong here. The main thing is that you're doing something. And of course, the key is to always do something positive for yourself, if you can, on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be a little thing. It could be watching your favorite TV show or a comedy to make you laugh. It could be just practicing breathing or meditating for 10 minutes. It could be preparing a healthy meal that you feel good about, you're eating well, and you're contributing to your health and well-being by eating well. So little by little, you want to put these things in your lives, right? Great. All right, let's see. So the idea is your state of health is kind of on top. It's what you see, it's what you feel, but what's underneath it? What's feeding that state of health? What are your lifestyle choices? What are your behaviors? What is your psychological motivational level? What is your spiritual being and meaning? What are all those other things that are underneath our state of health? You know, if I'm feeling stressed, what's underneath that? If I'm feeling good, what's underneath that? What are the behaviors that are contributing to my feeling good, right? What are the behaviors that I have that maybe are not so good, that I need to change? How motivated am I to change this? Am I ready to? Sometimes we want to change things, but honestly, I may not be motivated to change it. I want to, but I'm not really motivated to do anything about it right now. And that's okay. Sometimes we're there, and that's okay. You know, so sometimes we just feel stuck. That's part of life. Sometimes we get stuck. We just don't want to stay there too long, because then we could start feeling worse. So what contributes to our state of health? Many things. Many things that a lot of times we may not even be aware of consciously. We're not even thinking about it. And we need to think about it. You know, only thing I can control is me. And part of that is not only my actions and behavior, but it's my perceptions, how I see the world, how I think. How I think can make me sick. If I'm have what they call stinky thinking, or I'm thinking negative all the time and I'm complaining all the time. You ever hear yourself sometimes, right? You're complaining and like, I'm sick of tired. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of hearing myself complain, right? So because it's good. It's okay. You know, sometimes we do complain. Sometimes we are negative. Am I ready to get out of it? Am I ready? What's going on with me? Why am I feeling negative? You know, sometimes we don't even know. So again, we have to see what's going on. We have to check in with ourselves. We have to go beneath the surface. Right? And so looking for some people, you know, some people mention church, but also I mentioned spirituality that can be part of church. And some people are spiritual without going to church. It's whatever's comfortable for you. But that's a higher self. What is a higher self? The inner self, the higher self, the wise self. What does that part have to say? If we actually listen, really listen to ourselves deep inside, the wise self, what does the wise self have to say? Quite often we don't hear it. We're so busy, we're so preoccupied with stress, the day-to-day stuff that we think we have to do. We all do it, and we're doing the do, and we're busy, and maybe we feel good about it. Maybe we feel productive, but eventually that's not going to do it for us, right? We need what's good besides getting all these things accomplished. What do I need? If I wasn't doing anything, what feeds my soul? What gives me peace? Right? Where do I go to get some of that? Right? And so sometimes we actually physically don't need to go anywhere, but we need to check in with ourselves to listen to ourselves, what's going on, and listen to what we really need, really listen to ourselves. That's part of taking the time. That's part of being compassionate, to thinking that I have something of value in here I need to pay attention to. Because we all kind of give out here a lot. We all do it. You know, give, doing this, doing that. And we're just not checking in. We're not even present for ourselves. You know, also when we're feeling anxious tells us something. We need to pay attention to that. You know, feeling anxiety and stress is not necessarily, doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's actually information. It's telling us something that we need to change. If we didn't feel that way, we'd never change. So sometimes when we feel bad or we feel miserable, sometimes we need to feel that because we need to make a change. We're not on the right path. And those feelings tell us that. It's a clue. It's information. It's essential. You know, life is turbulent. There's ups and downs. And we're just trying sometimes just to balance it out, the seesaw. And sometimes it's really lopsided and it's terrible and it's hard. And I get that. So how can we make it a little easier when it is lopsided that we have no control over in the moment, maybe? What can we do to even it out? What do we need? We have to ask ourselves that. We can't leave it in that state. That's how we do get sick. We talked about it earlier. People mentioned it earlier. If I don't take care of my mental health, it can make me sick, emotionally or physically or both, right? So we have to value ourselves. and know that even you attending today said you valued yourself, no matter the reason why you came. You're here and you're listening and you're taking stock, right? You're trying to increase your awareness. What could I do? What can I do for me? How do I help myself? I can do the best I can to help someone else, but some of that's not in my control. And I have to deal with that, and I have to come to terms with that. And I might need someone to talk to about that because it's really, really hard and it's affecting me. Sometimes we get stuck and we need help. We need someone else to talk to. Okay. So you need to understand it's important. I know you do. And so a lot of this, for some of you, you've heard this before. But we need to know about feelings. How am I feeling? Check in with that. Check in. That's the emotional check-in. How am I feeling? How am I emoting? What am I thinking? What are my perceptions? All these are great clues to our lives of how we're doing. And how is it affecting my quality of life? Is it for the better or for the worse? Right? The image here, someone that's stressed, they're worried about money, anxiety, work overload, stress, expectations, deadlines. This is not good. This, right? If that's all I feel and that's all I'm thinking about, my quality of life rating is a 1. That is not good. 10 is like the best, right? We're not always going to be a 10. We could strive toward that. This is aspirational, but where are we now? And again, I could pick a number for today about how would I rate my quality of life today? So go ahead, and if you'd like to do it, please do. Put in the chat quality of life rating for today. And if you rate yourself low, there's nothing wrong with that because sometimes that's where it's at. So you can put the numbers in if you'd like. We're looking for balance, of course. Sometimes it's a 1 or a 2. That's doesn't feel good to be down there, but what can I do to improve that? Part of assessing this is knowing where I am, knowing I may like where I am or I don't want to be there. And how do I change that? So if I am a 3 and I want my life to be a 6, what would that look like? What do I need to do to get there? So we have a lot of 6 and 7s. Okay, very good. That's where people are at. 6 and 7 so far. So this is just checking in and knowing that, of course, if whatever you rate yourself, the next question would be, and again, you don't have to necessarily chat it in. Why am I a 6? What does a 6 sound like? What does it mean to you? 6 is kind of, a little better than half. What does it mean to you being a 6? And is that good? Maybe being a 6 is good. And you're happy with that. It's a good quality of life rating for you, that you like the 6, right? Someone put an 8. What is an 8 for you? Someone put a 5. What is a 5? So what does that mean to you? These are numbers, but your voice and what it means to you is what's important. Right? We have some 8s, we have some 6s, and I'm sure there's some people on that might feel like a 1 or 2. Sometimes I have that, and I feel bad about being that low, right? And I know why. I think about it. And what do I need to do? Is that just a bad day? Sometimes we have really bad days. Sometimes we have bad weeks. We just don't want to have bad months, right? We don't want to always stay at a 2 every day. But what's the quality of life? And then what are the things that enhance that, right? So what are the things in your life that enhance your quality of life? People put that earlier, similar questions, being around grandchildren, someone put, right? Taking time for myself, exercise, whatever that is, that's part of it. Quality of life is really an overall rating, but there's all those things could add up to be good or add up to be bad. So, this picture unfortunately happens to be a negative aspects that would make someone a lower one, but we could actually think of things that can make us higher in a quality of life scale, right? So again, just a quick check-in. One way of doing it is giving yourself a number. How you feeling today? How you doing? Okay, just want to talk about different feelings, differentiating between sadness, grief, loss, and depression. We all suffer grief and loss all the time, different reasons. Sometimes heavier than others, right? Sometimes it can be profound. And each of us, the reason for that might be different. But, losing a job could be devastating. And there's grief and loss associated with that. It's because it may not be our fault, but you're laid off. And that happened to a lot of people, right? Getting laid off from a job and struggling with that. because it triggers issues, feeling bad about oneself, feeling like somehow it's my fault, all the negative thoughts. And so that makes it harder. But, grief and loss is part of life, because we all have numerous losses in our lives, from losing loved ones to breakups, and there's other things that relate to grief and loss, even when we talk about when children grow up and leave the home. There's a change, a transition. So many transitions in our lives cause grief and loss as well. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a natural part of life. But if I get stuck in that, if I'm stuck in the loss and the grief and the sadness, and I don't know how to get out of it, and I'm feeling that way for a long period of time, that's when it goes to the part where maybe I need help, right? So again, grief, loss, sadness, depression, we all feel it. It's a natural, normal feeling. But when it becomes so heavy, then we might need support when it's too heavy to bear. Okay. So again, there's a continuum of, feeling things that are hard to feel, but natural to feel. But when they get so deep and so difficult, then it's time to reach out. And that's with any type of feeling. That could be anxiety, depression. Okay. But we do also want to normalize this, that feelings are normal. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with someone if they're feeling depressed, because they may have very good reason to feel depressed, right? And it's tough, and it's really hard, the depression. And even though it's not their fault, it doesn't mean it's their fault or that they're weak, right? It's just part of feeling life and things that have happened. And sometimes we need help to deal with those feelings. They're too hard to process ourselves. So reach out, right? Stress, we talk about being on a continuum. You know better than anybody when it's too much. Certain levels of stress kind of motivate us, right? Stress could be motivating, right? So if you have a test coming up and you're getting anxious about a test, that stress could be motivating. But stress could also be paralyzing, and that's when it's not good. When the stress becomes so much, insurmountable, overwhelming, you just want to bury yourself under the blanket. That's not good. So there's healthy stress and unhealthy stress, right? As you know, I'm sure you've heard this before, even when someone's getting married, right? It's a wonderful thing, wonderful event, but it's also stressful, right? It's also stressful. So even good things could be stressful. Taking a new job's great. Oh my God, yes, I'm working, I have money, I'm so excited. But at the same time, it brings up other feelings because it's new. You haven't done it before. It's stressful. You don't know people, whatever it triggers for you, right? So good things also cause stress, right? But there is a continuum. Stress is normal. But if stress persists for a long period of time and it's always there, and it becomes what we call chronic, where it's all the time, and the stress is too much, that is not good. That's when we must do something to break that stress cycle, right? Because it causes exhaustion. It could lead to negative thinking. It could cause agitation. It could affect your relationships, right? It affects how you think. It affects your feelings, right? Feeling pressure, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like your chest actually feels tight. So that is not good. So when it's like that, we have to break that stress cycle. We have to give ourselves a break. We have to find a way to do that. And if you don't know how, please do reach out and get help. Again, even if it's a coach or a counselor, people that help you look at what you're dealing with and help you come up with a plan, your plan that you develop. Because again, a lot of this, sometimes with people that are helping, they just ask the right questions because basically you have the answers. They just help you get to them, right? They help you get to those answers for yourself. So again, stress is normal, but if it becomes too much, it could be devastating. So again, this slide kind of reflects that. Talk a little bit about perception, how we see the world, how we see ourselves. Right? When you think about perception, do you tend to be an optimist or a pessimist, or somewhere in between? If you'd like to chat that in, please go ahead. So what is your perception? Your perceptions tend to be, is the glass full, half full, or is it half empty? That's perception, right? How we see things, how we process, what we think, cognition, what we think. And memory, how that affects us. So someone said they're an optimist. I have a couple of people optimists most of the times, right? Right. Yeah. So, sometimes we may not feel like an optimist. And what relates to optimism is our thoughts. So perception, thoughts, how we think of things. It's like when something bad happens, someone uses that saying, well, when life gives you lemonade, life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. I mean, that's pretty extreme, but, sometimes people are able to do that because they try to look at the positive of a negative thing, right? So that's kind of the optimist trying to look for. Now, even if we're a pessimist, we could work towards optimism. Telling ourselves positive things, like a mantra, positive things, actually we feel it in our body. So what you think, this is really important. What you think affects how you feel. What we think literally affects the physiology in our body. If I think negative things, I feel negative, and I literally feel like the body gets toxic at the physiology of it all. And what's interesting, the opposite is true. Physiology could trigger thoughts, right? So fight or flight, right? That's when your adrenaline's going really fast. Sometimes your adrenaline goes really fast. For some folks, for no apparent reason, that could happen. Maybe some past history for that. And so you start the physiology, you feel anxious, and now all of a sudden you have these anxious thoughts. Or for some other people, they're thinking things that make them upset, and then the physiology happens. So the mind body, spirit, totally connected. What we think affects our physiology, and our physiology could affect our thoughts. So sometimes people have a physiology in their body, again, no fault of their own, that because of the biochemical makeup, they may lend themselves to being more anxious or may cause them to be more depressed. And it has nothing to do really with their thinking. It's their body. It's the physiology in the body. It's the way it's made up. And that's why some folks need medication to help them with that, because it's not, the physiology is just not right. And so the medication helps balance that out, right? And so that they could feel better and think better, because the physiology is now under control and they feel better in their lives. They're happier. For some folks, they're happy now because the physiology is controlled, right? Now, sometimes we just think that way. We have maybe a lot of negative thoughts, and that could change the physiology, especially when things keep happening over and over again. So what we think is really important. I guess that's my point. What we're telling ourselves and what we're thinking and our perceptions really affect who we are and how we are. So we need to be aware of it. And we need to be aware of what we're thinking, because what we're thinking is what we believe. And sometimes you ever have thoughts that are not true, but we have them. So we need to challenge those. We need to challenge those. So for instance, I'll give an example. I feel guilty a lot, but I didn't do anything wrong to feel guilty about. Right? So you can have a feeling, doesn't mean it's a fact. So you need to check in with, we all do, check in with our feelings. Are they accurate? Sometimes I have feelings that I know are not accurate for the moment, but I feel them in spite of it. And I just tell myself, well, that's not accurate. And I'm not going to allow that feeling to overcome my thoughts. Does that make sense? So I could feel guilty, but I need to challenge it. Just because I feel it doesn't mean it's true. And say, I didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing to feel guilty about. It's just something I carry with me. Feelings of guilt for whatever reason, right? Could be from childhood, whatever it might be. Right? So we need to challenge that. I also want to talk about, just real briefly, some folks have a challenge in perception and cognition because of what we call psychosis. And psychosis is when we may have false beliefs, paranoid delusions, another thing people have heard of, or hear or see things that aren't there, auditory or visual hallucinations. And that could happen for lots of reasons. One is obviously it's sometimes it could be substance induced. I just want to mention that. So substance induced meaning I took something, I ingested something that caused me to have this psychosis. So it's substance induced psychosis, it's called. And hopefully it's temporary, you know, that when the person's no longer has the drugs in the body, that goes back to normal. And sometimes folks have what's called psychosis or schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. And again, not their fault. It's physiology, it's the brain chemistry, the way it works, that it leads to people misperceiving things because the physiology is active. So people think or feel things that aren't true or real. So that's the other extreme of inaccuracy. And that comes when people have schizophrenia, which is treatable. Again, sometimes people they don't have control of their perception because of the physiology of the brain, and the medication helps. Okay. The other thing I want to mention, as far as when we talk about memory and cognition, other things that may affect that, as we know, a lot of people mentioned Alzheimer's earlier. Alzheimer's impacts, obviously, perceptions, cognitions, and memory. Again, not the person's fault. It has to do with the brain. Sometimes it's atrophy of the brain, or what they call tangles in the brain, and that affects someone's memory. And so there's different types of dementia. Alzheimer's is the most common one that people know of, but there's different types of forms of dementia. And also potentially brain injuries too, when people have traumatic brain injuries, could affect perception, cognition, and memory, because there may be damage from a head injury that causes emotional dysregulation. So there's lots of other things that could cause this. So again, if you know, have a family member that has something abrupt happen, such as this, of course you want to get them, you know, abrupt. You want to get them checked out to see if there's anything medical going on. Of course, there's medical reasons for these changes as too. So again, we're going from, you know, how we think, what's in our control, to sometimes when people have either a medical condition or a psychiatric condition that really affect these areas of one's life, how they think, how we think, perception, cognition, and memory. So, you know, having things, saying things that aren't true.
Así que decimos cosas que no son verdad, porque hay veces tenemos una falla mental. Esto puede llevar al Alzheimer o a la esquizofrenia, o hay veces temporalmente por la inducción de sustancias que pueden afectar estas cosas. Esta es una área amplia, entonces cuando
sometimes people are concerned for their loved ones. You know, usually we're living longer, and as we live longer, you know, more people have developed forms of dementia or Alzheimer's. So get that checked out. And of course, there's always things one could do to keep our memory for as long as possible. There's a lot of techniques for that as well. Some people practice that, brain games to enhance memory. So some people take, you know, healthy vitamins that's supposed to promote memory as well. So again, just check in with yourselves. We want to always work on those things. It's good to start. And I also see, yeah, about guilt for sure. Mom guilt, yes. Very good. Just to talk about trauma, just because someone is exposed to trauma doesn't mean that it has to affect them in a negative way their whole lives. But trauma, we have to know the effects it has. There's different types of trauma someone could be exposed to. It could be a one-time event. It could be, you know, childhood trauma or over time, chronic trauma. So again, trauma affects physiology. And so when we're exposed to trauma, it affects us all differently. But we need to know that it does have an effect and try to minimize the effect as best as possible. So we definitely could heal from trauma. And we need to look at that. Again, might be from any type of event that it could happen. We're not going to go too much into that, but again, you know, we know what we're talking about here. We're talking about physical abuse, sexual abuse. Could happen in any age, of course, childhood abuse. And sometimes people develop what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's basically when someone is exposed to trauma and it affects them, that they have heightened anxiety. They may have flashbacks. They might kind of the flashbacks is like reliving the experience, or other things are sometimes either consciously or unconsciously avoiding things that remind someone of the trauma. So feeling nervous, feeling anxious, being hypervigilant, those are some potential signs. So again, sometimes people may not remember even been having trauma, but they have these feelings and they don't know what they're from. So the key is to control the emotions, control the feelings. Even if you don't remember something, that's okay, you can still heal. But just the idea of understanding the impact of trauma. And again, there's all different types of trauma that one might be exposed to throughout one's life, being a victim of a crime, things of that nature. And so it doesn't have to affect you your whole life in the same way. Most folks that are exposed to trauma, sometimes getting the proper support over time, the intensity of those feelings gets less and less. So that's the goal. For me, many, many years ago, I was a victim of trauma. I was assaulted violently, and I in the beginning I had all the signs and symptoms of PTSD for quite a period of time, I might add. And now that was, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 years ago. And to this day, if I hear someone running behind me, my body reacts. I'm not even thinking of anything, and I just let it go. So the goal again is to, when we have that, is to have less of an impact over time, and that's the goal. It never really, for some of us, it never fully goes away. Some of it, of course, is too traumatic to ever fully go away, but that does not mean it has to affect us in the same way as it did when it first happened. We try to come to terms with it. And so it's important, if you have any type of trauma history and you have any symptoms, or someone that's been through a trauma, encourage them to get the support they need, because it'll help them recover and heal. And recover doesn't mean it goes away, but it means that it's not going to have the same intense impact that it has early on. Okay. I was asked to just cover this topic, and I'll cover it briefly, because we all going to talk about, when someone's in crisis and people have suicidal thoughts. But I was asked to cover the idea of what's the difference between self-harm and cutting versus someone that's suicidal. They are different, and that doesn't mean that someone that might be what people say self-harm, meaning that they're causing harm to their bodies, like by cutting. That doesn't mean a person may not accidentally kill themselves. But typically people that are involved in self-harm, which is, again, the most common is some type of cutting. It isn't that that person's suicidal. It really is about having difficulty and having these feelings and not knowing what to do with them. They're really hard to cope with. And for some folks, the cutting is a release of that. So it's kind of a self-soothing. And so it's important, folks get help if you know someone, or if you yourself are a cutter. A lot of times it's hidden. People may cut themselves in parts of their body that you don't see, but it is a way of trying to cope. And so the goal is obviously if the person's open to it, to getting help, to finding other ways to cope with those feelings, whatever's underneath that. But it is different than someone that might be suicidal. Someone that has suicidal ideation and someone that has suicidal behavior. I mean, the idea is they feel like there's no way out. They feel in despair and they want to end their lives. They think about taking their lives, and that is different. I just want to differentiate that. I was asked to cover that, so I hope that's helpful. That in of itself is a whole other kind of discussion, but I do want to talk about understanding, knowing the signs of someone that's in distress, and knowing when someone's in crisis. Now, knowing the signs of when someone's in distress doesn't necessarily mean that that person is suicidal, but if someone's in crisis, we know they're having difficulty coping, and these thoughts this difficulty could lead to having thoughts of suicide, having thoughts of not wanting to live this way anymore. Okay, so a person may feel hopeless, have rage, be withdrawing, feeling unbearable pain, maybe feeling anxious, may have mood swings. And these are the feelings that they have they can't cope with, and they just want the feelings to stop. And so that might drive someone to have thoughts. Okay, so we want to ask people, if we know someone's struggling, how are you doing? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Right? And so a person might say no, and that may be true or not. So you just want to help anyone that's in crisis, a loved one especially that very well. You see a change of behavior. When someone's having a lot of these reactions, you want to know the signs so that you can help that person get to help. So knowing the signs, suicidal thoughts or actions are a sign of extreme distress. It is not a harmless bid for attention. If someone says they wish they weren't here anymore, that's kind of a passive way of saying it, but they're saying they wish they weren't here anymore. They're telling you they're thinking about it. They don't want to live anymore. Doesn't mean they're going to take the action, but we're going to, we don't know that, right? So we're going to pay attention to that. It's not them acting out and trying to get attention. The person is telling you they're struggling. So knowing the signs, the warning signs of someone that's in crisis that might need help is really important, because the reality is it'll be a family member or a colleague or a friend or a school mate that will see these things, these changes in the person before a professional is involved. So that's why we think it's important that the community be aware of knowing the signs of when someone's in crisis, what it looks like, and when to get help. It's the same as knowing when someone's having a heart attack and getting them to the hospital and calling 911. So it's important to know the signs. So I know I cover this topic when I talk about suicide prevention, but I think it's important to mention it here. So some other signs of distress is feeling of being isolated, feeling like a burden to others, feeling trapped in unbearable pain, potentially increased substance use or alcohol use, looking for a way to access lethal means, someone that buys a gun or a knife, taking great risks that could lead to death, such as driving extremely fast. So if you observe these behaviors in others, it's important to get help, okay? Get them the help they need. Other things when someone might be a suicidal warning sign: extreme mood swings, increased anger or rage, expressing hopelessness, feeling there's no way out, sleeping too little or too much, taking or posting about wanting to die, giving away important possessions. Many years ago, we had a call when someone was calling another hotline, and it came to our attention, and the person was giving away their dog. They loved their dog. That was a huge sign of giving away a prized possession, right? Saying goodbye to family and friends in different ways, be it in a letter or online, putting their affairs in order or making it well. So again, these could be signs of someone that might be in a suicidal crisis, or a sign of someone in crisis nonetheless. We want to make sure that we reach out, we let them know that we care, and we want to help them get hope, and help them get to the place where they can get to a place of finding hope. All right. So with that, there is the various numbers to call and the resources available. The suicide prevention hotline, the 1-800-273-TALK. And of course, there's the Veterans Crisis Line, and there is a crisis text line. I want to mention about the Suicide Prevention Lifeline starting July 16th. The number will be 988. Some of you may have heard about that. So 988 will be the new number. Instead of calling the National Suicide Hotline, 988 will not only be for Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, it'll also be for anyone that's in crisis. And the goal is to, instead of calling 911 if someone's in crisis, to call 988. I mean, that's what the education will be about. However, if someone is in imminent danger, or if someone is violent for whatever reason, because maybe they're under the influence, you still want to call 911. So there's times you would not want to call 988 for that. If there's a danger or it's imminent danger, it's better to call 911 first, because they have the resources to get out quick if it's imminent danger. Okay. So we talked a lot about thoughts, perceptions, looking at our behaviors, what motivates us to act this way. And some of these things are conscious, meaning we're aware of them. And sometimes they're unconscious, meaning we're not really aware of them. They're beyond our level of awareness. Okay. That's why sometimes when you take the time to meditate, or do some breathing exercises and allow your body to relax, you could tap into those other areas, right? So it's important to do those things to help us get in touch with what might be going on beyond our awareness. Like we talked about earlier, or at least I talked about earlier, about the idea of, I feel guilty, but I'm not guilty. I didn't do anything wrong. Well, that's unconsciously driven, right? Probably from childhood, probably before always feeling bad about things. A lot of things when we're children and we're exposed to different things, we don't have the brain is not fully developed yet. And so we just kind of internalize all these things because we can't process them. And so we kind of sometimes take these feelings along with us that don't make sense. And as an adult, that may not make sense, but that's where it comes from a lot of times. It comes from childhood stuff, unconscious stuff that we owned, that we took, that we still drives our behavior, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? So sometimes we have these forces that are right under our conscious level, pre-conscious and unconscious. It actually is driving our behavior. And so that's why sometimes people go into therapy to figure out, why do I do this? Like, for instance, why do I always pick people that are unavailable? Why do I keep repeating the same patterns of behavior, right? And we feel like, oh, why am I doing this? I keep doing the same thing, right? Because there's something going on unconsciously, right? There's something going on beyond our awareness that we're doing and we don't even feel in control of. That's when it's time to maybe get some support, right? To what the heck's going on here, right? So know that we don't always know what's driving our behavior. Sometimes it's very conscious, it's purposeful, and other times it's not. I hope that makes sense, but I just want to bring up the idea of the unconscious. Can't talk about emotions and can't talk about mental health without talking about what might be driving us unconsciously, because again, it's beyond our control, but we could figure it out, right? That's what talk therapy is about for some folks, is figuring out what is going on here. Why am I doing this? Now, sometimes we don't have to even figure out what's going on. Sometimes the counseling or therapy is about, all right, what do you want to change? What do you want to do? And we try to do it that way without getting into why, right? We don't need the why to make it better. That's what I'm saying about that. Sometimes we need the why to get better and sometimes we don't. So it depends on the person. But sometimes, okay, we work on coaching through that. What do you want to change? How can we do that? Let's look at what you're doing today, right? Instead of going back to the childhood, right? Going back to where it comes from. If we make those connections, great, you know, but know that we can make those changes in behavior in spite of not knowing why, right? So learning coping skills is part of mental health. So we talked about a lot today. I know I gave you a lot of information to process. I thank you for your patience with it all. So learning coping skills or enhancing our coping skills is really important. That is good for us. It's good for others. If you have kids, good to practice this stuff with them. Do it with the kids, right? Make it a game, make it fun, you know? So again, coping, breathing, coping, part of coping, putting less on our plate, that's coping, that's healthy. So again, what might you do to help your life feel better, to enhance your mental wellness? What coping techniques might you apply that will help your mental wellness? Some of that people already wrote earlier about bike riding, taking breaks, right? Listening to music, eating well, right? All of those things help cope. So don't forget about those things. I mean, is the goal happiness? Is that the goal? What makes us happy? So if I was going to ask you the question now, if you don't mind, put in the chat feature. If you think about a happy event in your life for the moment, don't write anything down. Just think about something that made you happy in your life. And if the memory of that actually could trigger the physiology of being happy. If we could think about where I was, seeing myself, you know, happy and smiling, like what was I doing? We could actually relive that and feel happy in the moment. Brings a smile to our face. You ever walking somewhere and you smell something, like it could be the smell of the ocean? It happened to me the other day. I was walking and I was by the ocean, and the salt was just much more aromatic. The salt of the ocean was just really strong. And I thought of this time, the memory came like without me thinking. I wasn't even purposely thinking of it. I just thought of, you know, this place in Provincetown in Cape Cod. I thought of Cape Cod. I mean, it's been many years since I've been there. And I thought of Cape Cod, and it brought a smile to my face. And I thought of how happy I was there. Just the smell brought back the memory. And it brought joy to me, right? So just thinking about, even if you don't feel happy, thinking about where you were happy makes us happy. That makes sense? So calling upon a memory, right? So people are putting in some things that make them happy, like fishing and travel. If we don't know what makes us happy, please, please, please make a list or think about what might make you happy and try it. You know, not all of us are really comfortable taking care of ourselves and doing good things for ourselves. It's work. It's like we have to work at it to be happy, right? We have to allow ourselves to figure out what do I like to do, especially when people are driven to just do so much for others. We don't make the time to maybe think about what we want or what we need because we're so busy taking care of other people's needs. And again, that could come from upbringing about, you know, why we act a certain way. It doesn't matter why. The thing is, it's okay. I could change that. So what would make me happy? What has made me happy? My dogs. Absolutely. My dog makes me very happy. And there's a chemical reaction when we pet our dogs, and we love our dogs and they love us back, or our pets or our cats or animals. There actually is a physiological thing that happens with connection like that. Right? Great. So my crazy husky howling, laugh out loud, going to Mexico. Yeah. Now, some of those things we can't do, right? Can't always travel. We can't always, you know, go to Mexico, you know. But, you know, so those things you want to put on your list, how about planning for travel? For me, it's like when I'm stressed, like, when's my next trip, right? Planning for the travel makes me happy. At least I know I'm going to make it happen. I'm talking about it, maybe talking about with who you're going to travel with, where you're going to go, looking at a map, whatever you do, looking online, right? So thinking about, but what could you do if you weren't traveling, right? Might be able to afford to. There's other things. What other things might make me happy that I could do today? Like reading a book, right? Someone reading fun fiction, gardening, you know, being playful. Being playful. What is that like? You know, I think as we get older, we forget to play. Kids are great at play. We need to learn from kids, right? Play. What does that mean? Having fun, right? Even if we have a lot of stress in our lives, if we could still add a little bit of fun in spite of it, it helps balance it out, whatever that might be. So the goal isn't always to be happy, obviously. I mean, that would be nice, wouldn't it? But we should know where our happy place is. Hopefully we have some things that we can remember of things that made us happy. Or if not, we need to create things that make us happy. We need to figure that out. Sometimes, you know, we look for happiness, as you know, we all do this at times, outside ourselves. What does that mean? I'll be happy when I make a lot of money. I'll be happy. I'm happy if my partner's happy. I'm happy if my boss is happy with me. I'm right. It's outside ourselves, right? Happiness, you know, we have to give it to ourselves. No one can really give it to us. It helps to be around other people that are happy. It helps to be around other people that are joyful because they can teach us, right? So, you know, having good people around you that tend to be happy and do fun things, that's good. Hang around with those folks, right? But it's an inside job, as they say. It's not something we could earn by doing things, right? It's something we just have to give that gift to ourselves of, you know, being happy. Being happy might be having less stress. Being happy might be finding contentment, right? So work on being happy, work on our happiness. Another way of saying it, some people it's about being happy, but some people say find your why. You know, creating meaning in your life. What creates meaning in your life? You know, whatever that is for you. Find your why. What's meaningful for you? Because if we're doing things we love and enjoy, and hopefully it's not just a lot of things and it becomes stressful, but if we're doing things we love and enjoy, and we're doing things that create meaning in our lives, we feel good. These are things that make me feel good. Doing these webinars make me feel good. I'm very lucky I get to do this. I enjoy this. I enjoy being with you and exchanging information. I like to help people, obviously, and this is one way I like to do that. And yeah. So again, doing things that give you joy, doing things that create meaning in your life. And if you're not sure what that is, that's okay. And by the way, what makes us happy and what our why might be, that could change over time, right? As we're reflective. You know, we tend to be reflective around anniversaries or birthdays. That's okay. Sometimes that's challenging, but we're reflective. We need to, well, is this where I wanted to be? Is this where I thought I'd be? And sometimes it's not, and it's not our fault. Things happen in life that sometimes we winded up in a place that we didn't ask for and we didn't plan. And we have to deal with that. That's hard. But again, beyond our control, things happen. But what could I do with what I have in front of me? All right, this is it. This is what's in front of me. This is what I have. I could be mad about what I have and angry about what's happening because I don't have control, but I could absolutely stay there. But is that a good place to stay? So it's like, in spite of this, of all these things, how could I find happiness anyway? You know, how could I feel good in spite of things that are making me feel bad? You know, and giving yourself permission to maybe feel okay. It's okay to feel okay. It's okay to give yourself the gift of whatever it is that you need, in spite of when other things are going on that may feel like a struggle. Because sometimes, absolutely, we're in a place that we didn't ask to be, and it's beyond our control. So trying to find that perspective, try to find our balance. That's what we've been talking about, really, is about how to find our way, you know, and find our balance, keep our balance. You know, when we're out of balance, what do we need to do? What helps? That's really what today's about. Some people consider spirituality, finding your center, finding life balance, whatever that means to you, self-defined. You know, health and wellness, there's all different ways of feeling well. We want to improve every area of our life. If it feels bad, just start with something, right? You know, sometimes people are really miserable. And I used to do career counseling many years ago. And one of my first persons that I worked with was miserable at that job. And ultimately they decided like it wasn't worth it. You know, I worked with someone else, they were miserable at their job, but they found a way of thinking of it differently, and they stayed at the job. So, you know, sometimes the perception needs to change, or sometimes we need to remove ourselves from a situation that's bad. That sometimes we can't get better until we do that, right? Sometimes we have to change our perception and we're able to stay. So there's such a thing as what's called financial wellness and, you know, nutritional wellness. All these things go together, right? Because we're worried about finances, that creates stress. If we're not exercising and we're getting more lethargic, or we're eating not well, all these things take away from my health and wellness. They take away from my mental well-being, right? So sleep's so crucial. If we don't sleep well, we are off balance immediately, right? Sleep is crucial for everyone, no matter what the age. Proper sleep, they call it sleep hygiene, right? If we don't sleep well, again, that could cause unwellness in many ways, both psychologically and physically, medically. So sleep is really important. So please do make sure you sleep a good amount of hours. Most people need between 7 and 8 hours. I know some people sleep less. That might change with age, but again, know what's good for you. Make sure you get the right sleep and you eat as well as you can, because those things affect you, right? People that go all day without eating, not good. Affects your sugar levels, right? Up and down, no good. So think about what you're doing every day and try to always enhance what you're doing. You don't have to do it perfectly. You just want to always look at that and try to head to the right direction. I think this slide on holding on and letting go, that's a tough one. Sometimes we're holding on to things that we need to hold on to. It's where we are, and it may not be good for us. And we need to process that. And we need to get to a place sometimes of letting go. Acceptance. That's hard. And that sometimes becomes the barrier to our health, our mental wellness, because we're holding on to something that is just crushing us in a way that's unhealthy. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting or removing oneself. Letting go is acceptance of where our situation is, even if we don't like it, and deciding what we need to do from there. You know, it's like holding on to the rope so hard and just not going to let go. And meanwhile, it's hurting us and it's tearing our hands. Sometimes we have to let go of the rope. And that could pertain to any subject matter. But sometimes we do hold on too long. And we get sick over it, right? Makes us sick. So knowing what to let go. So I know I'm speaking, it may sound a little abstract because it could apply to almost anything. It could apply to when we're in a job that's no good for us. It could apply to in a relationship that's not good for us. It could relate to a situation that we have no control over and we keep trying to control it and contort ourselves to control it, and we just can't. And it's making us sick. So we need to let go. What does that mean? That's something you have to define for yourself. Let go in what way? What could you do? Okay. So knowing when to let go. Sometimes we have to let go even of our thoughts, our perceptions of things, right? Like you ever hear people like hold a grudge? They never let go of the grudge. And I mean, I remember family members, sisters, two sisters, never talked to each other again over something that honestly, they probably wouldn't even remember what it was. They held on to the grudge to their deathbed, right? That's not healthy. Sometimes we have to forgive. Quite often we need to forgive ourselves too. Holding on and letting go isn't just about other people. Sometimes it's about ourselves. We're holding on to something negative about ourselves or critical. We're not forgiving ourselves about something, and we could literally make ourselves sick. So that's where the compassion comes from, the kindness comes from. We need to give it to ourselves, and we need to forgive ourselves for whatever that is that we need, so we can release. Because holding on to these negative things, feelings, emotions, or history, whatever it is toxic. It's toxic, and we need to let go. And we need to figure out how to get there. I know it's not easy for folks that may have some intense things we're holding on to, but we need to find a way of letting go, work toward that, to give more space to feeling good, right? So holding on to negative emotions is the example I'm talking about right now. All right, so take control of your life, create the life you want to live. You're the only one that could do that for yourself. It's up to you. It's up to us. It's up to us to figure that out. All right? How do we do that? Take steps. If you need help, reach out, get the support you need to do that. If you're miserable, go get help. You don't have to stay miserable, right? Being empowered versus being powerless. Being motivated. Sometimes we don't feel motivated. How do we get motivated? We need to figure out what the block is, right? Get motivated. So we could take action and we could take positive control. It's not black and white. Sometimes we're somewhere in between. You know, no one fits neat into these boxes. So we need to just deal with what's here, forgive ourselves, get rid of the shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? I should have did this. That's not forgiving yourself when you're talking about, oh, I wish this, I wish that. That's not healthy. We all do it, but we have to, that's the beating oneself up, right? So we're talking about sometimes living with ambiguity. It's okay not to know. It's okay to be stuck. Don't stay there though, right? It's okay not to know the answer as long as you continue to look for the answer when one is needed. We all get stuck. We all have difficulties. We all struggle. We all have challenges. Most of the time we handle them, probably successfully. Sometimes though we get stuck and we're feeling miserable and we don't know why. And sometimes we need help to get out of there. Sometimes we don't know an answer. We don't have the information yet. And just letting go and allowing ourselves to be okay with being stuck sometimes, right? Sometimes we are stuck. And sometimes this stuck is actually motivating, believe it or not. Sometimes feeling miserable is motivating, right? We just don't want to get stuck there and let it take over in a very negative way. Emotions aren't good or bad. They really aren't. They don't have to be. But if they're the same emotions and they're negative most of the time, that's not good. We need to do something about that. Sometimes I don't know the answer and I get frustrated with myself, right? Because I feel like I shouldn't feel this way. Why do I feel it? And sometimes I just have to allow myself to feel that way. It's okay, right? All right, so kindness, compassion, patience, love, and empathy. I'll say it again, kindness, be kind to yourself, be compassionate to yourself, Be patient with yourself, love yourself, and have empathy for yourself. Listen to your higher self, your wiser self, practice self-love. And you don't have to do it perfectly. Just your work toward improving upon and making progress toward your higher self. So some people develop mantras to help them. So some people have a lot of negative self-talk, and we got to know what that is and stop it and start changing it. I'm enough, I'm worthy, and I'm lovable, right? So we work towards it. You know, we don't want to get stuck in this downward spiral. Boredom, frustration, pessimism, insecurity, having all these feelings is not good. We're working towards this. That's what today's about, the upward spiral: contentment, hopefulness, optimism, enthusiasm, and passion. That's the upward spiral, and that's what we're working toward. And I apologize. I guess I have way too many slides. So I'm going to get through the end because I did promise time. And I thank you for bearing with me for questions. Some resources I just want to mention. The 988 starts July 17th, but the 800 number will still work. Someone asked that question. And then also with the Wellness Everyday website, great site. We have a lot of webinars on there, and including this one will be there as well. And again, the suicide prevention hotlines. We're happy to send this to anyone that would like. Today was talking about mental health.